Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. This is the Leadership Toolkit. As you know, your definitive leadership podcast for the opportunity to grow yourself, grow your team, grow your family, your life, your love interests, but most importantly, business and entrepreneurship so you can grow the people around you. I am excited today to bring an amazing guest as we have every week. I've had so many awesome people, and I am really excited to welcome this guest today. I've got Todd Holzman on the show. He is a former leadership coach to IBM's top executives, the former head of organization development at Honeywell and fellow with McKinsey's Change Center. He's taught world leaders all over the place. He is currently the founder of Holzman Leadership, and I am excited to bring him to you today, Mr. Todd Holzman. Welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for joining me today.
Great to be here, Mike. And that was a very exciting intro, by the way. It kind of pumped me up. So
thanks.
That's great.
Absolutely. Well, if you would take a couple, 3 minutes here and just, if you would expand sort of on your background in business and in leadership. And I've checked out your website and it is absolute fire. Like the things that you have laid out and the way you have it laid out, it made me even more excited to talk to you today. So just, if you would share a little bit with your background with everybody.
Gosh. First of all, I like the use of the word fire. That's very, very modern. I might have to start using that myself. And credit for the website goes to everybody on my team. Has nothing to do with me. So so thank you. And I guess they'll see this. Sure. And I'll give them that feedback. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So let's see. I guess maybe the question is, why the heck did I get into the field of leadership development and start a firm that's dedicated to that? First of all, I should say a little bit about why the funny background. I'm in the middle of moving offices, but I didn't want to reschedule. So sorry for the rugs and all the mess in the background. Now I'm only seeing myself. I'm not seeing you. Is that okay? Is that what you?
Yep. I got you set up right now, so you can just share about your background. I'll rejoin you here shortly. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, so why I got into the field of leadership, I guess, is the main question. I guess it starts with what we even mean by leadership, and the classical definition is, you've got authority. You've got people who work for you, and your job is to define some compelling vision for the future and motivate people to follow it. And I still think that's a good definition of leadership, but it's also very limited. We see leadership, and this is a view that I'm really was inspired by the professors that I taught with at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, professors Ron Heifetz and Dean Williams, is that leadership is the act of mobilizing people to face reality in order to make things better, to face the real problems and opportunities in our lives, both in and outside of work, and then on behalf of making people and everything around you better. And so this whole notion means that anybody can exercise leadership. It's something you do within your authority. It's something you can do beyond your authority, because it's not dependent upon you having authority. Your ability to have truthful conversations with people about the real issues and try to aspire them to be better is something that I would say is everybody's right and responsibility. And I guess my father always inspired me that things can and should be better. And my father already passed away over the summer. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And I thought trying to inspire and equip people to be better leaders, both within and beyond their authority, would be a way that I could perhaps, make some small difference in the world, because I also wanted my life to matter and to mean something. And so now, I started that journey back in the early 90s, and my team and I have developed probably, nearly 50,000 leaders globally at some great global 2,000 companies and lots of small companies in between, brands that you'll know that I can't mention because we're bound by confidentiality. But I've also developed a whole faculty of people. We have a 13-person global faculty. We've developed hundreds of trainers and coaches who in turn have also developed thousands of people in their own right. So that's kind of where it all started.
No, I love it. When you talk about learning leadership and teaching leadership, I like how you articulated it. For me, I'm very much like a John Maxwell fan, right? And so where he says leadership is influence, but I think how you get into influence, and I do end up kind of repeating to make sure I'm hearing my guests properly too. I like the way you articulated that. You said it's authority and vision, because when you have those things, that's what helps develop influence. One of the things too that you mentioned that was in the bio and that you mentioned as we were getting together is sort of getting to candor and having honest conversations with people. Do you feel, because you've been doing this since the late 90s, you said?
Late 90s? Early 90s.
Okay.
Well,
so
about 30 years. I mean, I started doing it professionally in 1994. So about 30 years.
Okay.
But even my undergraduate was in organizational behavior. So
Sure.
even before that. So in some way.
Do you think that when you're going into business, do you think leaders have a tougher time now getting to candor, being straightforward, having direct conversations with their reports? Or do you think it was tougher 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago?
What leads you to ask the question?
Well,
It's just a really interesting question.
The reason that I asked that is for a couple of things. One, I think there's people moving into leadership right now, and so often when people are promoted, especially, a lot of times we'll look at leaders as managers, right? They're getting promoted on into a company as an executive or as a CEO, as a team lead, right? And so often I think my view is as more and more time has gone on, especially call it socioeconomic climate, call it some of these things, it seems like HR often has a tighter hold on some of those folks. And so I'm just curious, like, has that changed over the time that you've been doing this? Because, and again, one of the areas of focus I know for you is sort of getting to candor, having honest conversations with people, looking somebody in the eye and telling them, hey, here's what you need to know. It may be not what you want to hear, but you need to know this. At least that's the way I took it. And if I'm reading or interpreting that wrong, then by all means correct me. But that's why I ask, do you think it's harder for leaders to get to that straightforward conversation today or when you started, or is it in between, or is it just different?
Okay. So let's talk about whether it's harder or not, but also as part of that, maybe I'll say something about what my colleagues and I at Holzman Leadership mean by candor.
Sure.
Which is certainly what you're saying is half of what it is about the ability to kind of express yourself truthfully. So, I understand why people ask the question about, is it harder? There seem to be so many more things that people need to be sensitive about and need to kind of avoid being truthful about. And there's a fear of getting canceled and things like this.
Political correctness, right?
Right. That's right. And, that's why Bill Maher had the show way back when, Politically Incorrect. And that's why he has the segment called Real Talk. Or maybe that's the name of his show, I'm forgetting. So I don't know, man. I think maybe it's a bit harder, but it's always been really hard for people to get to candor. And now, so I guess the question is, why is that? Well, first of all, we have to talk about what the heck do I even mean by candor?
Yeah.
So what I don't mean by candor, first of all, is, saying whatever you think and feel. And I remember I kind of, that point kind of came home to me because I was talking to the managing director of kind of talent, leadership, and learning at a major global bank. And she said before they had hired us, we instituted this thing called straight talk, which was an invitation for people to kind of speak up and express their truth. And she said it gave lead with Jim, live with Mike. I just saw that.
Yeah.
Okay, on the street. But she said it gave license to every sociopath to say anything that they thought and felt. So, candor without, I think, real compassion can be cruel.
Sure.
It's also not just about saying what you think and feel, because, none of us have a monopoly on the truth. So the way we think about candor, and this is going to explain why it's so hard on people, is it's a collaborative search for the truth with other people, where you're trying to figure out what's true with someone else on behalf of doing more good in the world. And so, to quote Jordan Peterson, the truth is a handmaiden of the good. And I wish I could have come up with that. I did not.
I know, that's a great line.
It really is good. You can hear some of the religious undertones, with that. So you have to be, we talk about candor, and it shouldn't be so radical, by the way. You have to be equally committed to expressing the truth of what you think. You have to be equally committed to understanding where somebody else is coming from and their view of the truth as you are in expressing your take on what's true, and then reconciling it to figure out what's actually really true. So why is that hard on people? Because it requires us to live up to these very noble aspirations of what it means to be a human being. It means you've got to be courageous, because it takes courage to express the truth of what you think.
Sure.
Right? Because maybe people won't like it. You risk maybe looking stupid and being wrong. It also takes curiosity. You have to be really curious about what other people think. It takes collaboration, because you have to think, okay, we've got to work together to figure this out. And I don't have all the answers. And by the way, it takes a lot of compassion, because people are going to think all kinds of things and do all kinds of things that your mind will automatically blame them for. And that's the death of trying to figure out what's true and doing good. And so these are things that all kinds of religious texts, mystical traditions, philosophical teachings have tried to inspire and elevate people to be more compassionate, more curious, more collaborative, more courageous, certainly. But what we know is that under pressure, this is some of the research that's coming out of Harvard, this amazing research practitioner named Chris Ardress, is under pressure, we all default to an overprotective program. So instead of being courageous, we try to keep ourselves and other people more comfortable. Instead of being more curious, we're more controlling. Instead of being collaborative, we want to compete, we want to win and not lose, we want to be right and not wrong. And instead of compassion, we're often condemning people. And so we are divided within ourselves. We have our higher natures, but we have our baser natures that get activated under real world pressure. And then we're profoundly we're overprotective of ourselves and others. And so this wiring that I'm talking about, this overprotectiveness, has been with humanity for millions of years. And so if you look at the span of time, there's some cultural nuance now that make it more difficult, but just being a human being makes it difficult to get to candor when I define it that way.
Sure. No, I think that's awesome. I mean, it really is amazing. The points that you bring out, because it's like the good versus evil within people, right? Courageous, curiosity, collaboration, compassion. I've got all these things within me, and that's when you're operating in a good place and you're moving to candor is how I took that to mean. And then it's sort of that back all the way up to, I just need fire and warmth and I'm trying to protect myself. It becomes that, live in comfort, control, competitiveness and condemnation. So
Yes.
that leads me to my next question then. Actually, a couple things. I get so far ahead of myself because I sit and listen and learn. Like I said, I love these conversations. A couple of things. One, as people are listening to the show, I would strongly encourage you check out holzmanleadership.com. That's spelled HOLZMAN leadership.com. Make sure and check out Todd's website. You can see all of the awesome offerings and things that he has there. You can connect with him. Also, he brought up right before the show, and this is awesome, and thank you for this, Todd, but if you email Lace at holzmanleadership.com, that's LACE at holzmanleadership.com, and you could just put in either my name, Mike Phillips, or Leadership Toolkit, and he said you've put together some free resources for people.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
I'm going to leave that on the screen for a minute. I always spell it out, so if people are listening on the audio podcast later.
That's great.
So here's a question I've got for you, Todd. If say I'm in that leadership role and I notice myself falling into that overprotective space, because I think people that are good leaders, we do have an emotional intelligence about us. You do have a good, self-awareness. Most people do. And so if you notice yourself falling into that overprotective, the 4 points that you said, the comfort, control, competitiveness, condemnation, and you start where I'm just not operating in a good place, do you have any actions or items that you would recommend for people? Hey, here's some things that have worked for me to pull yourself out of that so that you can move back into a good leadership space.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's really hard for people to be aware of it when it's happening.
Okay.
So I'm gonna ease into answering your question more directly so that my brain can spool up with hopefully a good answer. So this is called me stalling, but I still think what I'm going to say
let me help
be useful. This. Go ahead.
Let me help add some more frames. So because I think many leaders surround themselves with good advisors. We've all heard it said, like, okay, you're the sum of your 5 closest people, and you have the peers for finance or business and so forth. Right. So let's say you have one of those people that you really know and respect, because I respect that answer a lot, Todd. The fact that it's like sometimes it's hard if we're in the thick of it to see the forest for the trees.
Okay, fine, fair enough.
So say somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, man, you're really screwing this up." And so they bring, either you have an awareness yourself or someone brings you to awareness. Then what are some things that you can do either within yourself or with others that you'd recommend to help pull yourself out of that?
Great. That actually helped me a lot. Thank you. And actually, I think you and I are illustrating it right now, right? Because I didn't have an answer to your question. And I kind of conceded that. And then you said some stuff. And it gave me some space to think.
Sure.
So maybe we just learned something right now. It's in the moment, maybe get other people talking and give yourself some space to think and ground yourself so that your confusion and your emotionality doesn't end up dominating you. See, sometimes generally leaders who've made it to some, let's say some significant position of authority, they're usually pretty darn articulate. And they have the experience to be able to talk themselves out of anything. They could talk a good game. So the mistake is we're going to go blah, 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 right? And maybe the mistake is like shut up and ask other people some questions to buy yourself some time so you can reconnect with yourself and something higher, okay? Now, what to do? So if you do have some self-awareness about some of the things that may inhibit you from leading more effectively, communicating more effectively, getting to candor, I think it depends upon, first of all, what that thing is. So as an example, I'm on a podcast once a week, sometimes as a guest, and sometimes more, which is I'm really enjoying it. And I was on a guy's podcast yesterday who does leadership for the healthcare space.
Okay.
And he was describing this scenario of you've got a nurse practitioner who now is the manager of other nurse practitioners for whom, they were peers, they were colleagues, they have drank together, they've gone to their baby showers together. And now this person is really reluctant to give her colleagues honest feedback,
Okay.
right? She's worried about the conflict, and it's just physically uncomfortable for her. For her, I think, so if her thing is comfort, I think she has to remember and perhaps remind herself of what her higher purpose is, and that her colleagues share her higher purpose, which is to serve those patients. So if she thinks about the conversation she wants to have that's uncomfortable for her with her former colleagues and her peers, and she reminds herself that, what I'm going to tell them about is how what they're doing is maybe creating adverse outcomes for the patients, or if they could do something differently, it might create a better experience and outcome for the patients that we all care about. We share this mission. Then I don't think she will feel as uncomfortable with having the conversation. And it's also important to remind yourself, like, let's say if this comfort thing gets in your way,
Sure.
what are the consequences if you avoid the conversation? Right? And often we are understandably afraid of the negative consequences of having the conversation, but we should be more afraid of not having it. Because more often than not, the cost of avoidance is higher, much higher than the cost of engagement.
Why do you think so many people then, and I absolutely agree with you. I think that's a great line you said right at the end, is you said the cost of avoidance is much higher than the cost of engagement. So I think that's really good. If you don't have that written down somewhere, you should. But the question is then, why do you think humans, do you think it just falls to that space of, gosh, it's because I want to be comfortable? Why do we avoid that conversation? Why do we end up in this space of fear or reluctance?
So there's numerous answers to this question.
Sure.
And this is something that I think I could say with confidence that no one has studied this phenomenon more than my colleagues and I have.
Sure.
When you look at 50,000 conversations that didn't produce the results that leaders wanted, you learn something about what it is that they're doing that is preventing them from getting better results, and why it is that they do it. And when you look at the data, first of all, what's very clear is, listen, the easy answer is they're just afraid. Okay, fine. And that's true. But I think it's more subtle than that. One, most people don't think about, most of us are very short-sighted, right? We're thinking about what's right in front of us. So we see the immediate problem, and we're not thinking about the midterm or longer problem. So, and if you force yourself to think about it, okay, on a page, write down all the bad things that could happen if you have the conversation. Now write down all the bad things that could happen if you don't have the conversation. The right side of that ledger, it's going to be longer and more disturbing. So people just generally, we're so busy, we don't give ourselves the time to think. So that's one thing. The other thing is people just don't know how to have these conversations. And so therefore, we're more afraid of them than we need to be if we had more skill. So I'm by nature, as an example, Mike, I'm a horrible driver by nature.
Okay.
Okay.
And you're in New York, so that's.
And I'm in New York, but it's like, well, I hardly drive anymore. I became a good driver, but by nature, I'm a horrible driver, and I got a couple of car accidents. So I don't know. I decided how to solve this problem. Let me invest my time in training to be a race car driver. A very strange response, I know. And I'm on the racetrack, and I was so bad, by the way. So I had a car out in Vegas. It was part of a club and all this stuff, and I would travel out there every month.
Okay.
And eventually I moved there to get better at all this. I was so bad that you had, at the shop, all the names of the guys on a keychain. Al, Dan, Doug, blah, blah, blah. And the last person's name on the keychain was Crash. That was me. That was my racing name, Crash, which is a pretty cool racing name. But I was so bad at driving, I didn't even discern my own name. And I'm in these cars going around a real racetrack, and it's terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But as my skill went up, the fear never went completely away, but really subsided. And this is so. Yes, fear is an understandable response, but we have done a horrible job in our field of articulating what good looks like and training people to do it. So therefore, people naturally avoid things they're not good at.
Well, and I think one of the things too, you brought up a couple things is fear by nature. Like it's we feel that, right? We manifest that in ourselves. We as humans know what fear looks like. I've articulated to my son and my daughter now. One of the things that we've talked about is when we're talking about overcoming fear, and I know this is maybe down the rabbit hole a little bit, but when you're thinking about having those conversations, sometimes you got to reframe the fear in the conversation. One of the things, like my daughter's a competitive gymnast, and so she does some stuff that's just off the wall scary, and I never imagined she'd be doing, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things, and this is probably 2 or 3 years ago, that I said to her, and she's only 12 years old now, so she's probably 10. We're having this conversation. She says, "Well, I'm scared to do this." And one of the conversations I had with her, I said, "Well, okay, so what does scared feel like? What does that feel like physically in you?" And she says, "Well, my stomach gets in knots, I get butterflies, I start questioning, I do this." And so she's sort of articulating, here's the physical manifestation of how that is. And I said, okay, well, so let me ask you a question. When you are up on the podium, once you've won something, how does that feel? How does that? And she goes, "Well, I get excited and I get butterflies and I get that." And I said, okay, so the physical responses are the same. It's how you frame it here, and so if your excitement response, butterflies in the stomach, maybe sweaty palms, all that kind of stuff, that's the excitement response, is very similar to the fear response. You have to reframe how how your mind thinks about it. And so I'd like to think, as a dad, that's helped her through some, because when she goes to do that scary skill, she'll stop and go, okay, I got this, game on. And how can I approach this and make it an exciting time to be able to accomplish the skill rather than prevent myself from doing it.
Well, I think there's a good idea embedded in that, Mike. That's I was hoping I would learn something from this conversation, and I already have. So, which is great. No, thank you, because I think it's not like people have never had an honest conversation that didn't go well. I think it's a rare event, and I'm not talking about having an honest conversation that with somebody where you have like tons of trust, they were super open. No, we're not talking about the easy button here, but had an honest conversation that was difficult for you and it went well. I'm sure people have had that experience. So maybe it's important for people to remind themselves of that, just like you reminded your daughter of, well, what did it feel like to be on the podium? And then maybe the juice is worth the squeeze, right? Maybe the some of the difficulty you have to face is justified. But what's really hard for people, though, is when you're, so first of all, I think the essence of leadership is being truthful in order to make things better. Okay?
Yep.
Because the whole job is, if you're going to make things better, and you're going to do that through influencing other people or with other people, then there has to be a problem or opportunity, some current reality where there's a gap between where there's a gap, meaning there's a real problem, or there's simply an opportunity, like things are okay, but things could be better. There's some current reality that is undesirable, it could be better. So you're not going to get people to do things differently, right? Unless they agree that's true. And I don't care if you got all the authority in the world or you're leading beyond your authority. If you're giving feedback to somebody if you want somebody in your team to improve their performance, and it means they have to stop doing X, they have to start doing Y, then they're only really going to do that if they agreed that there is a gap in their performance, and doing X is a problem, and doing X is a problem, and doing Y would make things better. If you don't have that agreement on what the current state of reality is, no change is going to happen. So this is where, being truthful is very important. But the moment, let's say in this case, you're expressing the truth of what you think, you don't know what's going to happen. And that's scary. But this is where I think faith becomes important, because you have to act as if the best thing that could possibly happen is through a genuine pursuit of the truth. And the thing is, you don't know until you do it. And I've had conversations before where I was scared to say what I thought, and I did. And I sweated it for 48 hours, man. And then something good came out of it. Yeah. But, my faith abandoned me so quickly in that 48 hours. I'm a believer. Oh, forget it. It's gone in a freaking heartbeat. But then, again, some of the Jordan Peterson has taught me something about my own work around this is,
you express the truth of what you think to your people, to your boss, to a customer, to your loved one. I understand the anxiety is natural, but it's also adventurous too, because you don't know what's going to happen. And that's really cool, because one of the things that makes life so boring sometimes is how mundane and predictable it is. Same stupid conversation with the same person, same outcome. You know what she's going to say. She knows what you're going to say.
Sure.
And so, leadership, the essence of it is, I think, truth seeking and good doing. But I think it's also how you live the most meaningful life and rich life possible.
I really enjoy your points. There's a couple things I wanted to point out here that I really like the saying, and I've heard this many leadership trainers, many people that are really rooted in their faith spiritually. I loved your statement where you say act as if. I think that's a very powerful statement, and people should, for anybody that's listening, I always encourage people to write things down. Write that down. Act as if. I remember early on getting into sales, and that was one of the first things that they told me. I had a sales manager that's still a good friend to this day. And there's different ways you can frame it, right? He used to say, well, if you don't know the answer, you can either baffle him with BS or you can act as if you know, and he says, but if you don't, you got to stop and ask questions. And that sort of always stuck with me. And so I think that's a really powerful statement when we're defining ourselves. You have to be careful. You can act as if, you can visualize, hey, what does this other person out there look like? You've brought up Jordan Peterson several times. So I imagine his work, his YouTube, his writings. And so I think it's one of the things, like, for anybody, if you're a fan of Jordan Peterson, I am as well, it'd be easy to ask yourself, well, you act as if, well, what would someone like that, what would someone in Jordan Peterson's position, how would they respond to this? And, we can carry ourselves through to a point until we don't know. And then you go to somebody else like Todd, or you go to somebody else that may be in your circle, and you ask, hey, how would you solve this? And I think we have to, you can act as if to a point, and then we have to be humble enough to be willing to ask to get the answer to as if as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sometimes ask and thou shalt receive.
Absolutely. One of the other things you brought up just a few minutes ago, and I want to bring this back up, because you talked about, part of getting to candor, part of connecting with people as a leader is good communication. And I was trying to jot stuff down. I don't remember the specific statement, so you can help me with this one. but you.
Well, I'm pretty long-winded, Mike. So something I'm trying to work on. So I can't blame you for that.
Well, the statement you made was talking about communication. You said, "Hey, we're not taught how to have these conversations."
No.
So I guess that leads to two parts. One, do you think, and this is just a sort of a personal question, but I think it's something that has affected or infected business. Do you think that with the massive rise of social media has affected people's ability to communicate well? Just an opinionated question.
It probably had pluses and minuses, actually. I mean, the minuses is what everybody talks about, right? So there's a lot less in-person, face-to-face interaction between people.
Sure.
So I guess, you lose some social skills. I think probably in that process. I mean, I certainly remember, what it felt like after COVID, after being on, these Zoom calls, maybe because Zoom was huge. And all these other apps really weren't doing much. And then suddenly having in-person meetings, and honestly, it felt strange. Imagine somebody from the 80s. Imagine going back to the 80s suddenly right now, or the 90s, before there was any social media, and put yourself back in time and how strange that would feel.
Oh, yeah.
On the other hand, the social media, you're competing for so much attention. So things like Twitter, you only have so many characters to say what you need to say. And generally, people need to be better at saying things shorter, as I've often demonstrated on this podcast. So there might be a plus to it as well. I don't know what the research says on it, but that would be my theory on it. And I certainly know it's, things that we have published on LinkedIn. I'm very conscious about that people are going to they're only going to give you so much attention. So how can I get it and hold it? And I think that's an important skill for leaders too, because you have to get and hold people's attention onto the real issues that you want them to face. And how do you do that? And that is attention management is a key leadership skill.
I'm going to jot that down too, because that's so true. So a couple of other quick questions here. One, as you're talking about, and I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, Todd. I'm curious because and I know you've brought up Jordan Peterson a few times. And so sounds like you're a fan.
Yeah.
Who are two or three other leaders or people that you find influential that you might recommend for our audience to, obviously yourself, and I can't say enough. Go check out Todd on LinkedIn. I would definitely say connect with him. It's linkedin.com/n/Todd, TODD Holzman, HOLZMAN -43061A.
But if they just type in Todd Holzman,
just type in Todd Holzman, it'll show up. So definitely connect with you on LinkedIn. Check out Holzman Leadership as well. So, I know oftentimes my audience will reach out and connect with folks, but who do you have that you allow in your headspace to influence you?
Everyone. My initial reaction to it is, sorry, I'm not going to really answer your question, Mike, because I think maybe we're all too obsessed with finding some famous person to listen to, or famous is a good word, some prominent person, and maybe I'm being too critical because, sometimes people are famous for really good reasons, and there are things that maybe we should emulate in them because we have put them up on some pedestal for a reason. So I don't want to, I'm knocking it, but I shouldn't knock it as much as I'm knocking it. At the same time, right? You remember the movie Love Actually? And there's this the opening scene, Hugh Grant is narrating it, and you see all these people, greeting their families and friends at Heathrow Airport. And he makes this point that love is all around us. And you just have to look. And I think learning is all around us. You just have to listen. And this might be getting, I don't know, too spiritual or religious for your audience, but I think we are all portals to the infinite. And there's this great symphony out there that all of us are able to communicate pieces of. And so little bits of the truth lie in every little conversation with everyone around you. And maybe if we get off of looking up all the time and we look around us, the lessons we need will be given to us. I remember, so I went through something in New York here, but I think it's certainly a worldwide thing. Landmark Education. And they have, it's like a personal development thing that was an outgrowth of Werner Erhardt's S from the 70s. Bit cultish, but I still got a lot out of it. Okay. And I'm a graduate from their curriculum for living, which I went through across the space of, say, a year and a half or so. I thought it was fabulous. And I was paired up with this, I don't know, we had to say something. We paired up with people. We had to explain our reasoning for doing whatever our work was. And this was about 10 years ago. And I'm paired up with this 16-year-old Korean girl, right? Okay. Who just came to this country, barely speaks English. And I'm at the point in my mid 40s, early 40s, whatever, Ivy League degrees up the wazoo, training all these world leaders. I'm like, what am I doing here? And I give my little spiel to her, and she looks at me and goes, inauthentic. Like really annoyed with an annoyed tone, but inauthentic. Oh, wow. The thought is, who the are you? And then I thought about what she said, and it's like, son of a gun, she's right. And I would have discounted because of her youth, and maybe she's not understanding what I'm saying because like she's really struggling with English. But there was something there for me. And thank God I just didn't, my impulse was to reject, but at least I was able to fight that a little bit and learn something from it. So that's my answer to your question is like, okay, find some people that are worth emulating and looking up to. There are plenty of historical examples that are worth looking back at from history, from religion, all of that. But maybe start looking around you more and look at maybe all of the people in your life with maybe new eyes. Maybe see your wife or your husband with fresh eyes, and maybe they'll say something if you're listening that will actually surprise you. And maybe it's there every day for you, but you're so used to hearing what you always hear, then you get what you expect. Just a theory.
No, I think there's a lot more than theory to it. I think that's very powerful, Todd, very powerful because, one, I'll recap what you say. Secondly, what's going through my head, and I think you started to say this earlier, right? Seeking you will find, asking it will be given unto you, right? So it's those. Right. So on one side, if you have to be deliberate in seeking, in asking, in doing those things, right? And then secondly, the second part is you have to listen, and you summed it up so beautifully. It said, learning's all around us. You just have to listen. And so learning for leadership is I love the story because I wish I could say, oh, I've never been in that situation, but the reality is if you sit and listen, and especially you'll have sometimes, my belief, right, God will put those people in front of you over and over again. You hear something once and you go, yeah, and you kind of play it off. And then all of a sudden somebody says something a second time or a third time and you go, well, maybe there's some merit to this. I need to slow down and pay attention, right? So
I was reading a book on writing I forget the name of it. Gosh, it was such a good book. And there's a morning prayer that she offers to people in creative fields. And I think it's in this book where she says something like, the Ninth Symphony was given to many composers, but only Beethoven, a deaf man, could hear it. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
Wow. How do you, hey, I'm curious, and we'll kind of come to the tail end. Usually, between 45 minutes to an hour here is sort of the sweet spot. I have two questions. One will be sort of a sum up, but how does Todd Holzman, if someone's watching this, because again, I think one of the unique things, and I've started adding this or similar questions to my repertoire, is it's easy for people on the outside to look, and they'll go and look at your website or connect with you, and we say, okay, well, if there's learning everywhere, I want to know what makes Todd tick. How does he start? How do you start your day, man?
So I'll just say my preferred way to start my day.
Yes.
And that lately I've been having difficulty holding to. But what I like to do is, first of all, I like to get out and get some light in my eyes, because there's some research on that helps you wake up. So what is it? Huberman is another guy that I like. Andrew Huberman is his Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab. And then I like to wait a little bit until I just my first cup of coffee, but that's going to have to happen. And I try to give myself 45 minutes to an hour. There's all kinds of research on that. So I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to that stuff. And then I like to sit down and I write. I don't have my red book with me. What good shall we do in the world today? And what do I need to clear out so I can hear the truth? And then I try to get all the crap out of my head. The noise, the fears, the anger, whatever I'm waking up with, man. And then sometimes that's just a good clearing exercise.
Sure.
Because you can't plant anything in a field that has all kinds of rocks in it, meaning my various, maybe small emotions. And then, not always, and I'd like it to happen more often, then something occurs to me that ends up being really important and really influential. And that shapes my day, my week, my month, like that.
Love it.
That's what I do.
So
ask a question. Those questions.
No, I love it. So as we come to the tail end, here's a couple of things. I'll ask this question. I'm going to remind some folks on how they can connect with you. But just I'd love to hear any final thoughts, any nuggets that maybe you were considering sharing but we didn't get to. Any final thoughts to take us out for this afternoon?
I mean, I guess what I would say to people is, leadership is extremely difficult, and it's no small thing to take it on your shoulders, whether you're going to be a leader of people that are kind of your charges or your flock, or you're going to try to mobilize people, a group of people that don't have to listen to you to face problems they prefer to avoid.
Sure.
But that's the nature of the work. And, don't deceive yourself about that. But I think it's worth it. Because who you will become as a result of taking that on your shoulders will be the very best version of yourself that's possible. I guess number one. Number two, the lessons are all around us all the time, and the learning is all around us, and it's just a matter of looking for it. And even your failures probably are your best teachers. I know they're mine, and I wish there was an easier way to learn, but I don't generally learn unless I get beat up, unfortunately. Sometimes it's psychologically more than anything, emotionally. Yeah. And I guess the third thing is, if you're going to talk about anything important with anyone else, most important thing is to treat the conversation as a collaborative search for the truth in order to make things better. And that being the orientation versus trying to be right and not wrong, trying to win the argument, trying to look good, not bad. I'm not saying those things aren't important at all. They're just not as important as this other thing. And that's the one thing I could say, that if you can bootstrap yourself in being a more effective leader, if you treat every conversation as a collaborative search for the truth on behalf of some higher good, I think you're going to show up as your best self that's available to you in that moment.
That's wonderful, man. Thank you. And so, as right before I take us out, if you would hang out for just a moment, a couple of things and reminders for everybody. If you want to connect with Todd on LinkedIn, I have his LinkedIn link on the screen. I'll have it in the show notes. You can just search Todd Holzman, TODD, Holzman, HOLZMAN. Also check out holzmanleadership.com. And then lastly, Todd was kind enough to set up some resources for this show. If you email lace@holzmanleadership.com, that's LACE at holzmanleadership.com, you can just reference Mike Phillips or the Leadership Toolkit. Yeah. They will email that to you. And thank you so much, Todd, for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate you. If you would just hang out for a moment while I take us out.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit with my new friend, Todd Holzman. Man, what a wealth of knowledge. I've got, I think, 2 pages of notes front and back as I'm sitting here jotting stuff down. I know that if I'm able to gain that sort of wisdom and insight from someone I know, and I pray that you have as well, do me a favor. One of the best things you can do to help this podcast and this show grow is just throw some thumbs up on it, depending, whatever platform you're watching this on, throw some thumbs up on it. If you're on Spotify or iTunes, please make sure and leave those thumbs up on the show. And the best thing that you can do is, besides growing yourself, you've already listened to this, like I said, take notes and go back and reference those, but share this with somebody that you know would grow from this message. That's one of the biggest, most powerful things you can do. That's the goal of this show, is grow other people. So share this with somebody that will see some growth from it. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day. And until we speak next, stay great, everybody. We'll talk soon.